Oh, it's so nice to see such attractive people out on a day like this. My name is Merchant Hall Bitely. And in my life, I was a grocer, ran a hotel, was a street commissioner. I guess I was never really rich. And I was looked down upon by the uppity people of Glens Falls, but that never bothered me much. I lived my life the way that I wanted. I was born on October 23rd, 1849, almost exactly 9 months after my father and mother got married in January of that year. My father, Melville Bitely, was born in Fort Edward, and my mother, Maria Hall, was born in Arlington, Vermont. I had a baby sister, Estelle, too, but she was born in 1851. But before she was born, we moved to Glens Falls in 1850. For many years, my father worked for the state police, then as deputy sheriff, then as Glens Falls village constable, from 1859 to 1870. In 1874, he was a part of the first paid police force in Glens Falls. He was famous for capturing George Willett, barbershop murderer, one of the most infamous criminals in Glens Falls history. I was 22 when I opened a hotel with my parents at the foot of the Glen Street Hill. It was called New Hall House. It was located with the feeder bridge on one side and the Glens Falls hide and tallow shop and a blacksmith shop on the other. It was advertised thusly: New Hall House, Glen and Canal Street in Glens Falls, adjacent to the canal bridge. This new and elegantly furnished first-class hotel is now open with superior accommodation to the public. I was certain this enterprise would make me a fortune. I worked hard. But the neighborhood became seedy with loose entertainment and taverns. My father was a lot of help, him being a deputy sheriff and all, with keeping it a safe place to stay. I also helped him with his auctioneering business, which provided me with a little pocket change so I could work up the courage to ask Charlotte Elizabeth Bateman to marry me. Everyone called her Libby. We lived in the hotel, even though it was around this time that my parents sold it to Duncan McGregor, and he leased it to Byron Harris. Then in 1881, we started our family, even though we were no longer business owners, with the birth of our own darling daughter, Edith. And the next year, Libby found herself with child again. But to my great and lasting sorrow, both she and the baby died in February of 1883. The baby was a boy, and his name was Duncan McGregor Bitely. I was lost without Libby. And I had this baby daughter to take care of. I didn't know what to do, so I turned to Libby's family for help, especially her sister, Nellie. And so Edith moved in with the Batemans at 192 Ridge Street, and I opened a grocery at 13 Ridge Street, and I lived upstairs from it. I visited Edith as much as I could. And I saw the bond that her and Nellie had formed. She was just like a mother. And two years later, Nellie and I were married. So I closed down the grocery, moved out of 13 Ridge Street, moved in with the Batemans, and became a traveling salesman. With being on the road a lot, you can get pretty lonely. So Nellie and I, we made up for lost time whenever I was home. So I guess you won't be surprised when I tell you that Nellie and I had 6 children between the years of 1889 and 1906. Vivian, Hildegard, Ruth, Doris, Charlotte, and poor little Elizabeth, who was stillborn in 1893. My father died in 1896, and my mother died in 1897. My father was described thusly: Bitely of the hawk's eye, the scent of a hound tracing down its offenders against the law and order of the village. A born vigilant, with the body of a Roman gladiator. A man feared and revered by all. With having 6 children, Nellie wanted me home, so I moved home. We opened a grocery, and then we moved to 14 May Street, and 73 Elm Street, and 22 Stoddard Ave, and then around this time I was also working as a street commissioner. And, sad to say, I was stricken with Bright's disease, malady of the liver. And while living at the house on Stoddard in October 1912, age 62, I died. I left Nellie with 6 children, ages 5 to 22. By then, Edith was married to M. Elverson Redford. She had a house of her own, and Nellie struggled to make life work out. She worked as a domestic for a little while, but by 1919, she, Ruth, and Doris had to move out of the house on Stoddard and move into an apartment at 171 Bay Street. Between the years of 1924 and 1940, Nellie, she lived with her stepdaughter, Edith, in Glens Falls, and Charlotte in Putnam County, and Hildegard and her husband, Olin Ides, in Lake George. Then, while at the Sumter Nursing Home in Glens Falls, 1943, Nellie passed away. By then, all our children were married and had lives of their own. 3 of which were in Glens Falls, the rest scattered throughout New York and Pennsylvania. Like I said, my life wasn't special, historically. I worked hard, I loved and respected my parents. I had 2 happy marriages, 8 children. Guess you could say I was a dreamer, just hoping to make my fortune. I know a lot of people who have had far-off adventures and crazy places. I had my adventures right here in Glens Falls. Woo! When I think of all those daughters, I sure hope they found happiness. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the weather.